What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And it is Monday, August 21st, 2017, Eclipse Day. The eclipse is just now finishing up on the east coast of the United States, and big news for everybody. Unfortunately, we were rained out here on Oahu this morning, so we couldn't even see it as a partial. But a lot of people did get to see it. A lot of people did get clouded out. It's a risk. Hang on just a second. I got to deal with something. Okay, here we are, and we're back here, and it looks like Skype was giving us grief rather than our old trusty equipment. So let's try this again here. And hang on just a second. I got to get. Boy, everything in this shop is broken. Okay, according to the control room, I'm now sounding good, so let's just go on back here. We're talking about the eclipse sweeping across the United States. We got rained out here on Oahu this morning. Some people did get clouded out. Some people were very lucky. The clouds were just thick enough to act like a filter, and they could take pictures of the crescent sun. So it was a big event for amateur astronomers all over the place. And, of course, everybody is trying to cash in on this thing. And I don't just mean the roadside people selling glasses, but everyone's trying to use it to serve whatever their agenda is. And, of course, it was inevitable that over on social media, you're seeing the global warming extremists out there saying, well, see, if we can predict the solar eclipse, then obviously we're right when we predict that humans are warming the Earth. But I think the absolute nadir of crass exploitation of the eclipse has to go to the Atlantic. Now, the Atlantic used to be a great magazine, and they have an article on out which appears to not be satire, in which they're saying that this eclipse is actually racist because most of the area where the path of totality lay across are mostly white parts of the country. So, see, the solar system is biased. This is from the Atlantic. And, I mean, talk about absurd. But, I mean, everybody's out there trying to push their agenda no matter what they're using. The eclipse is racist because the sun is white and the moon is black. It's racist. It's absurd, but that's where they're going. All righty. The other news that we have here right now is that at 9 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, which is 5 hours from now, Donald Trump is going to have a message to the American people where he's announcing a new Afghan war strategy, which from all indications really just amounts to a restart of the current Afghan war strategy. Pour more people, more money into Afghanistan. That's our new strategy, because we're going to go on doing the same thing over and over again, no matter how many times that falls flat on their face. Now, Donald Trump is out there pushing this idea. Obviously, at this point, it is imperative for the American government and the American military not to be seen to lose a single war, because we're all getting sick and tired of the war. And as long as we're winning, all right, maybe it's okay. But if we lose one, the American people are going to stand up and say, okay, that's it, we're done, out of the pool, everybody, we're finished. That may be why they're going back into North Korea. We didn't lose in North Korea, we just never finished that up. That's why they're still trying to find a way to get in Syria. Remember, all the way back in January, they were ready to give up in Syria. Oh, we can't do that. We can't be seen to lose a war. Or we're losing in Afghanistan. Well, we can fix that. Just more people, more children, more money. And, of course, Donald Trump is expected to try and sell you this new war in Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, with the promise that Afghanistan's mineral reserves, which are worth an estimated $1 trillion, will pay for the war and the reconstruction after 16 years. Now, maybe it's my dementia, but I seem to recall hearing exactly the same promise being made about going into Iraq. Oh, this won't cost you American taxpayers one little tiny penny. We're going to use Iraq's oil to pay for the war and the reconstruction. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I recall hearing that all the way back then. Not everybody thinks this is going to work. Experts are saying that getting at those mineral resources is going to be difficult, especially over in the mountainous eastern region. Remember, you could have all kinds of treasures there, but if you can't get it out of the ground economically, you just leave it there. Unit cost of extraction, that's the phrase to keep in mind here. Now, another story, this coming out of Insider at Fox News, basically saying we're reliving history. We're reliving British history when they got clobbered in Afghanistan. We're reliving the Soviet Union when they got clobbered in Afghanistan. And for all intents and purposes, we've lost in Afghanistan several times, and they just keep going back in. No, we haven't lost. We're just taking a breather here. And that's basically what's going on here. The goal is to not be seen as losing in Afghanistan or any place else. But we've had 16 years in which every single U.S. tactic in Afghanistan has failed and backfired. The only thing that's coming out of Afghanistan besides body bags is the oil and gas pipeline and all the opium. So, now a lot of people are still talking about the departure of Steve Bannon from the White House and as signaling the end of any possibility that there was going to be anything different about this White House than the predecessors. And the generals are back in charge. You can see it. They're talking war. They're talking war with Afghanistan, war with North Korea. And by the way, I mean, all morning long, the fighters been buzzing overhead and rattling the windows. They sure act like they know a war is coming. Now, the good news is Bannon is, in fact, going back to Breitbart, at least for the moment. More about that in a little tiny bit. And did I mention the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443? I think we kind of got stumbled over eclipse and technical issues and the rest of that. Now, right now, we are at the 64th anniversary of the U.S.-sponsored coup d'etat in Iran, where the CIA went on in, destabilized the country, and overthrew the elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh and imposed the dictatorship of the Shah, until finally the Iranian people had enough and kicked the Americans out in 1979. And we need to keep this in mind. The U.S. government has now reached the point where it's admitting it's been doing this. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973. This is what the U.S. has been doing, and the rest of the world now recognizes it. That's why it's not working as well as it used to. People see the trickery. Remember 2009, they tried another coup d'etat in Iran. Oh, Ahmadinejad is bad. He wants to destroy Israel, and they had snipers on the roof killing people, and it was really bad. Then they made two big goofs. One, they brought out the son of the Shah of Iran, who said, I am ready to resume my hereditary throne. And then they brought out the flag of the new Iranian Republic, and it was the flag of the Shah. And at that point, the people of Iran said, hold it. We're done with this one right here. But it's important to understand this is what the U.S. has been doing around the world to at least 50 other nations. And this is the reason the United States government is hated around the world. It's not because of our freedoms. It's not because we got Disneyland. It's not because we have Miley Cyrus or the Kardashians. It's because we don't mind our own business. The U.S. government feels it has a divine right to go on in and mess about with other people's countries. Now, as you know, there's been a lot of bizarre lawsuits here in the United States that seek to just declare by judicial edict that Iran was connected to 9/11 and to sue Iran, seize Iranian assets on behalf of victims of 9/11. And it's absurd on the face of it because there's absolutely no proof that Iran had anything to do with it. But the U.S. court system has descended back to the days of the witch hunts. I think you're a witch. You prove me wrong. Code Napoleon. The principle of presumption of innocence is now gone. Well, Iran has now decided to play that same game back in reverse. And an Iranian court has sued the United States on behalf of victims of American-made chemical weapons supplied to Iraq by the United States during the Iran-Iraq War. And the Iranian court is now ordering the U.S. to pay $245 million to the victims of those chemical weapons. And they have a much stronger case because everybody knows the U.S. did supply those chemical weapons. They actually found some of them when they invaded Iraq and tried to claim that they were Iraqi. People were looking at the numbers on the shells and said, nope, these are U.S. made. These are left over from Iran, Iraq. So now Iran, theoretically, is in a position to start seizing American assets that come within its range. Sauce for the goose. Now, down in Syria, yet another video has surfaced showing the United States military allowing convoys of ISIS fighters to flee the Syrian city of Raqqa. Now, the U.S. is bombing Raqqa. ISIS is supposed to be our enemy, but this footage obtained by Al-Masdar is basically showing these vehicles of ISIS fighters just driving on out the highway and the American military just standing there doing nothing. All right. Now, apparently, according to Erdogan, Tehran, Moscow, and Ankara are working on a lasting truce in Syria. The U.S. is not invited to the talks because everyone pretty much understands they don't want a truce in Syria. They're looking for a way to get back on inside there, so it's not seen as a gigantic loss. But they're already preparing for it. Remember, about a month ago, they were saying that following the defeat of ISIS, the U.S. would stay in Syria to deal with terrorism and all this other stuff. And everyone was saying, why? You're not wanted there. Syria doesn't want you there. You don't have their permission. You're telling us you're there to get ISIS. You're on the verge of getting ISIS. Why are you going to stay there? And apparently they couldn't come up with an excuse that anybody would buy. So today, the State Department is saying that once ISIS is eradicated from Syria, the United States will leave and pretend it's a tremendous victory, which we all know it isn't. The U.S. agenda in Syria was to replace Assad with a ruling puppet junta. So this is a defeat. The history books won't record it as such, but that's exactly what's going on here. Okay, apparently Ukraine has resumed massive bombardment of Donetsk. This started happening actually Friday. Massive shelling campaign along the contact line in Donetsk. Apparently over 150 munition rounds were fired. They're firing on the airport, the Volvo Center, and the surrounding area. So that is heating up over there. Now, this is an interesting story. This is kind of a case of flipping the bird back and forth between the U.S. government and Russia's government, because apparently the U.S. Embassy in Moscow is suspending non-immigrant visa processing throughout Russia starting Wednesday because of Moscow's requirement to reduce its diplomatic staff to 455 people by September 1. In other words, in complying with the U.S. request to reduce diplomatic staff, they are cutting those services Americans would want to be using, like tourism or education. They're still going to process the immigrant visas for people who are trying to move there, but all the others are going to be shut off. It's just a way of showing displeasure, and unfortunately, it's the only people it's going to hurt are, again, the students and the tourists. But it's our way of showing displeasure. We can be just as childish as the U.S. government. Now, as you know, there is a growing tiff between India and China, and Washington, D.C. is moving rapidly to strengthen their ties with New Delhi in terms of their military strategic alliance with India. In other words, if India and China go to war, guess whose side the U.S. is going to be on? And at this point, our government is so desperate for a major war. I don't think they even care who with anymore. they could come up with a decent reason for a war with Australia, we'd be at war with Australia. This is one of the reasons I love Michael Moore's Canadian Bacon movie, because it is so insightful about the way government really operates. We need a war to save the economy. All right, we'll pick a war. Who are we going to go to war with? I don't know. Get a dartboard for heck. China's already talking about limited war with India, which I think is rhetoric only. I think it's basically comes down to they're not going to use their nuclear weapons, because India also has nuclear weapons. But for those people standing on the ground, trading the bullets back and forth and everything, the idea that there's a limited war is nonsense. There's nothing limited about it. You've got people trying to kill each other over a section of roadway. And there may be some other things going on as well, having to do with the fact that, first of all, when China was starting this One Belt road, they wanted India to be a partner in it. And instead, India said, we're just going to go off and do a little something of our own. And apparently China is also attempting to drive a wedge between Bhutan and India as well. So there's a lot going on over there, and it looks like there could be a real flare up there. I mean, we're looking at a world where there are potential flashpoints for war everywhere. It's almost like the bookies, I'm sure, are taking bets. Where's World War III going to break out first? $20 on North Korea here. $15 on Bhutan, and so forth and so on. We're definitely on our way to World War III. There are way too many world leaders who see that as their best option to deal with whatever their problems are. Economic overpopulation, lack of an industrial base. For most of those leaders, of course, they're being goaded on this path by the United States government, which has been constantly invading and regime changing and drone striking other countries for no good reason for the last 20 years now. Now, South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, is still trying to keep a lid on all this. They are, South Korea and the U.S. are, in fact, continuing those military exercises right along the coastline of North Korea. The exact thing that Kim Jong-un said, please don't do this. But South Korea's Moon Jae-in is saying, well, yes, we're having military exercises, but they're not meant to raise tensions, which tells me that he's not really in control of what his own military is doing, and he's trying to, like, pat this thing down, calm it down, even as the U.S. is basically throwing kerosene on top of this fire. And everyone's saying, why is Kim Jong-un reacting like this? Why the nutcase? Why the rush for nuclear weapons and missiles? Well, if you look at the history of the Korean War, it was absolutely brutal. And Robert Neer, back in 2013, wrote a book called Napalm that said that the U.S. burned down just about every city in North Korea. Killed off over 1 million Koreans. Yeah, they're going to be nervous about the U.S. brandishing their weapons around. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And obviously, as a lot of people have already noticed, the BAM user video streaming feed is working today. Unfortunately, the email to what really happened just stopped. Not entirely sure why. Being hacked or something like that. Boy, isn't it an adventure living in modern-day America? What's going to fail today? What's going to break and blow up? It's exciting. Alrighty, let's get down to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Like, you know, I don't know how these warmongers think they're going to get the military ready for this. Give you a couple examples. One, you look at this guy, this Nazi, this crazy Nazi that was, who was driving a car there in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
The guy was in the Army for 4 months. He actually managed to get it, even though he has history of being a mental case, including psychotic drug, taking anti-psych drugs, so-called anti-psych drugs, and they still took him. Obviously, he failed after 4 months, but he still stayed in there for 4 months. And why did they take him in the first place? The other thing is what happened to the John McCain yesterday.
Oh yeah.
What happened to the other? What was the name of the other ship last month?
Fitzgerald.
What's happening there shows that I just don't think we're getting the best and the brightest anymore. We might have been getting them right after 9/11 when people bought into the thing, and I bought into it myself, that we were attacked by Islamic terrorists. But not that we trusted our government and we trusted our media. But that's no longer the case. I just don't know. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, I was pretty much occupied today. What did they say? What did Trump say about Afghanistan, what he wants to do?
Well, he hasn't announced it yet. He's going to announce it tonight. But the rumors are basically that he's going to be escalating. Apparently, Mattis is fully on board with whatever the new strategy is, and that tells us right there that we're talking about escalation.
Wow, that's bad news. I mean, and like I said, how do they expect to do it? Bergdahl, by the way, this was a few years ago, was another example of a guy that wasn't wrapped too tight. So they're lowering the standards for the military, which is pretty common. When they're having problems getting recruits, they usually do lower their standards.
Yes.
It happened during the Vietnam War.
Yes.
I don't know if it happened.
No, they went to a draft. They got tired of accepting these real losers through enlistment, so they went to a draft and they started getting, basically the best and brightest, the youngest, most athletic, the most intelligent. They put those genius IQs right out on point.
But if they go to a draft this time, if they try to go to a draft, you think you got trouble now. You're going to have an insurrection. This time, you're going to have people on both the left and the right probably joining each other. I mean, you're going to have riots in this country that made the '60s look tame.
Yeah, we're already there. Current events are making the '60s look like the '50s. And again, back in the 1960s, that was the reason the FBI was playing all their dirty tricks to turn blacks and whites against each other, to keep them from uniting in common cause against the war in Vietnam. Clearly, that's a big part of why they're trying to fan up race hatred yet again.
Let me give you one example. When I was in the Army right at the end of the Vietnam War, it was just about, that's why I didn't, one of the reasons I guess I didn't go,
Yes.
I was and I was stationed at Homestead Air Force Base,
yes,
which was an Army missile base for about 4 or 5 months. And they had all kinds of problems there. I mean, people were smoking. There was more weed available there than there were that you could find in a high school or a college.
Yeah.
I mean, people were on those missiles, on those batteries, high as a kite. So a few months after I left, a Cuban, I don't know if you remember this, a Cuban defector, a pilot, landed his plane in Homestead without being. Now he didn't have any, he didn't mean any harm. He just wanted to get out of Cuba.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is, nobody detected him on radar or anything else. Everybody was shocked. I remember. I told people I knew. I said, I'm not shocked. I expected that.
All right, Mark, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So let's get on back to North Korea here, because everyone's trying to make it look like Kim Jong-un is a nut job, and, how could he possibly be concerned about U.S. intentions in his country? But you need to go back and actually study what happened. According to 8th Army Chemical Officer Donald Bode, on an average good day, pilots in the Korean War dropped 70,000 gallons of napalm per day. A total of 32,000 tons of napalm were used on Korea, double the amount dropped on Japan in 1945. More bombs were dropped on Korea by the United States than in the whole of the Pacific theater during World War II, 635,000 tons. At the end there, Pyongyang, which was a city of 500,000 people before the war started, only had 2 buildings left intact. The North Koreans have grown up seeing that damage. It's a living memory for them. People in the United States, war is an abstraction, something we see on a video game. And now, of course, we're seeing the few remaining monuments and battlefields of the last war actually fought on our soil being removed. For people in Europe, people in Japan, people in North Korea, the scars are still there. It's very real for them. Now, once again, the corporate media is trying to make it look like Kim Jong-un is just going to haul off and start a nuclear war without a good reason, that he's going to fire a missile because of the drills. And once again, that's not actually what he said. Basically, he said these new joint U.S.-South Korean military exercises are adding fuel to the fire of heightened tensions, and that North Korea will be watching and monitoring very carefully so that it remains a drill. Because obviously, with all of these assets, huge numbers of troops, ships, aircraft, it could turn into a real invasion on a moment's notice. And what Kim Jong-un is actually saying is, the instant this drill turns into an actual military operation against North Korea, yes, they're ready to go to nuclear war. So nobody should be surprised at North Korea's behavior. And let's be honest, it isn't North Korea that's introduced nuclear weapons to the peninsula. The United States has put hundreds of nuclear weapons in South Korea. Why would North Korea not want to seek a deterrence? And that's what they really want, a deterrence. They want the U.S. government to mind its own business. Nothing wrong with that one. Meanwhile, over at the White House, National Security Advisor McMaster is still talking about preventative war against North Korea. Oh, they're going to do bad things. They're going to be able to stop us from invading, so we might as well invade them now. It is nonsense, this idea of preventative war, because it doesn't really matter who starts. Once the war is on, the war is on. You're not preventing war at all. You're the one initiating it, despite all this rhetoric. You're starting this thing. We must resolve the situation. Well, you created the situation. Well, yes, but that's our job. We'll create the situation, then we'll resolve it. Meanwhile, North Korea is sending a message to Australia advising them not to support a U.S. attack on North Korea. Now, looking at the globe, I don't know that Australia would really be playing that big a role in it. But obviously, Australian forces are probably up there with the exercise as well. Now, let's talk about the USS John S. McCain. And I'm in agreement with that caller. Is this really the best that they can get? I mean, they've been through the Naval Academy. They're on command track. We have families in the Navy. And used to live here. We used to get to go out on the ships. I'm going to talk about the ships in a little bit. But, I mean, this is getting ridiculous. 10 sailors are missing. 5 are injured after the USS John S. McCain collides with an oil tanker near the Straits of Malacca. It's an almost duplicate of what happened with the Fitzgerald. And it's time to really take a look at this, because we've basically had 4 collisions now by U.S. Navy ships in just over 1 year. The USS McCain, the USS Fitzgerald, the USS Lake Champlain, the USS Louisiana, back on the 19th of August, 2016. Four accidents. And certainly in these last two, it seems like the bridge crew does not understand the rules of right-of-way. Now, I know there's a lot of shills going on saying, oh, it was a deliberate attack. They deliberately tried to sink our warship or whatever. But again, the official U.S. Navy investigation into the Fitzgerald incident basically relieved the entire command crew of duty. And that tells you that, yes, they messed up. And what is really amazing to me is because I've spent a lot of time on the water. I'm a rag setter from way, way back. I was married under sail. Claire and I have done Fiji by tall ship. And I've spent a lot of time sailing. And there are rules that are accepted globally about who gets to go in front of who. And at the very top of that list of ships you do not get in front of are those super tankers and those super cargo ships, because they cannot turn quickly. They cannot slow down quickly. They're the top of that list. And then it goes down from there. There's a ladder. Sailboats under sail, tall ships under sail are given priority in right-of-way because they're sailing off the wind. They're limited in how they can maneuver. And underneath that come the powered ships. But they all got to play by the rules. And it looks like in the case of the Fitzgerald and in the case of the McCain, you had a bridge crew that said, oh, we can get in front of these guys easy. And they went for it. There's something that's gone wrong with training of these naval officers if they don't understand there are accepted global rules for right-of-way. And we also need to get rid of this attitude that your service can mess up. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and the best response is we're going to cover it up and not talk about it. Whether it's the Fitzgerald, the McCain, TWA 800, we need transparency and accountability when these things happen. Remember when the Vincennes accidentally shot down that Iranian passenger jet? And the corporate media was out there saying, well, no, the Iranians were attacking the ship. The Iranians were attacking the ship. You shot down a passenger airliner. Yes, but we were under attack. Kept trying to make it look like it was the other guy's fault. And eventually the U.S. government had to come, or the U.S. Navy had to come on out and say, yeah, we goofed on that one. We feel really, really bad. I'm sure they're saying exactly the same thing now. Yeah, we goofed. We feel really, really bad. The same thing after they said the same thing after the Greenville sank that training ship from Japan. We're going to go to a world war with weapons and crew like this. I think there's one lesson to be taken away from both the Fitzgerald and the McCain incident. These ships are delicate. They're fragile. Remember that story that came out about a year and a half ago? The Navy was experimenting with a new drone. It got out of control and it punched through the housing for the spy radar. Punched right on through from the outside, burned up $30 million worth of computers. There's a fundamental design flaw with America's current Navy, and that is an over-reliance on active defensive systems. And this emphasis, if you will, on just plain old-fashioned armor plate. These things look like they're about as fragile as a glass Christmas tree ornament. And when you look at how Russia's latest state-of-the-art electronic warfare can get in the way of those ships' active defenses, it's very alarming. Remember what happened to the Donald Cook up in the Black Sea? This single Russian airplane approached it 12 times. And every single time, all the defensive electronic systems on the Donald Cook went down. And that means that if that Russian had actually fired any kind of artillery or cannon, it would have just sliced through that hull like a hot knife through butter. So there's something very wrong out there. And then we hear the stories about the F-35 and the F-22. And, of course, everybody in the military-industrial complex, they're making money like crazy. And they think it's great and it's wonderful. Oh, we've got the American people bamboozled. They're falling for that old Russian threat thing again, and we're just going to take all the money and have lots of fun. And they have done this before. In the years leading up to World War II, Harry Truman was sounding the alarm that huge amounts of money were going into defense contractors and they were not producing useful, effective weapons. We need a new Harry Truman is what we need. Forget Hillary Clinton. We need a new Harry Truman to come on out and grab that military-industrial complex by its shirt collar and shake it and say, look, we may be going into a real war. You better start getting your act together. Because if you're on the losing side, well, then you're going to be in trouble. Alrighty, moving on from that, and I guess the reason for the rant is a simple one. I'm opposed to the war. I don't want to see the war, but I don't want to see all these young Americans who are going to be killed and crippled just because somebody scrimped on the armor plate someplace or somebody didn't supply a properly patched piece of software to run the weapons. Because that's what's going to happen. I remember many, many years ago when I was in London working on a project, and there was this war memorial, which you have to appreciate the British sense of humor. As you probably remember, halfway through World War II, Italy switched sides. They killed Mussolini, they terminated with the Nazis, and they went over to the Allies and said, we're with you now. And they shared what they had with everybody, and it got to be a problem because Italy wasn't really the master of manufacturing that Germany was. And so in London, or at least back when I was there, there was this little tiny monument, out-of-the-way place, to all the British soldiers who died trying to use Italian-made weapons. That's literally what it says on the front of it. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's too bad Italy realigned with the globalist Nazi. Now, part of that EU group of thugs. What is, Mike, did you see the footage of the Russians bombing the ISIS convoy?
No, I didn't, but I imagine it was probably spectacular.
Oh, but I have to say, Mike, when you see the convoy, you say, hey, these guys look like a professional army. I mean, I saw footage of the Syrian army fighting these ISIS guys behind, dirt mounds, and I'll tell you one thing, man, these ISIS fighters, they can fight back. They're not wusses. I mean, I was kind of, surprised, how they weren't giving up,
Well,
definitely mercenaries,
Yeah, definitely mercenaries. No question about that. They're trying to privatize the war there.
But, yeah, the Russians clobbered them, Mike. I mean, it was it was crazy. I was like, holy... I mean, they're all, I think, headed to Deir ez-Zor. So that's where it's going to be, man. That's the battle. That's the battle of the century right there. Yeah,
it's getting close to being over there, and I don't know what the war hawks in the U.S. government are planning to do to get back in there. If they're just going to start wars everywhere all at once, North Korea, Syria, Afghanistan, Iran, and just go for it. But I don't think they can win. I don't think they can win at all. Even if they go nuclear.
Yeah, no, they're going. I mean, look at another incident with the ship. Like you said, I mean, something's going on. I mean, what I think? With all this corruption, they're putting in people that are their friends. They're not. They don't really know anything. They're just putting the head of the class in, not necessarily being the most educated in that particular field. And something's got to be done. This is ridiculous. 10 more missing, probably more.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's ridiculous. I've never seen too many like that this close to the other one. So definitely something's gone wrong. I guess, this is what happens with decadent empires. They collapse from within. That's part of it, Mike.
Well, I imagine that the Naval Academy, gets their share of, well-connected young men and women whose idea of being on the Navy or being on the water is just catboating around, the harbors there up at Martha's Vineyard or something, going from party to party to party. And again, though, there's something wrong. These are expensive assets, along with the lives lost. And it is it is an issue. Something has gone wrong somewhere. And if we're really going to go to war against these other countries, somebody's got to shake up that Pentagon. And you know, again, I don't want to see a war, but if it's going to come, I don't want to see any more of our kids get killed than are absolutely necessary. And right now, between its high cost and poor quality, the biggest threat to the United States of America continuing to be a nation is that military-industrial complex.
Hey, Mike, you also know, I noticed a lot of rust starting to form on our ships and the British. I know the British just launched their new aircraft carrier with Windows XP, but I mean, I noticed a lot of their ships are starting to form a lot of rust on it, and I'm like, man, Russia's got all these new ships coming out, and we got ships still, like with rust forming on them. I mean, it's just definitely, everything's been turned around. Like, the Chinese got all new ships, their Navy's incredible now, and it's just, you know, ours is getting decadent because, you know, like all empires, they come and go.
Well, they don't have the budget for maintenance, is what it is. I mean, a lot of these are what are called mothball ships. We have some mothball ships over here in the West Lock here in Pearl Harbor. If you go over to San Francisco Bay, over in Alameda, they've got a mothball fleet there, and that most of that stuff is really ready to be turned into scrap at this point. You know, there's a proper way to mothball a ship, and then if you just tie it to the dock and ignore it, it's definitely going to rust. Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're now starting to see word swarming around the Warhawks that they are seriously considering as part of this preemptive war against North Korea, decapitation strikes on Kim Jong-un, his nuclear testing facilities, and where they think all the missiles are being kept. And that, of course, is a heck of a gamble. I mean, the other day they were saying, oh, he's got many more nuclear warheads than we thought. He's ready to go. He's got 60 of them. Well, maybe it was a flat-out lie, or maybe they don't know. And certainly by now, any deployable nuclear weapons Kim Jong-un have been dispersed. They're not in the factory. They're not in the warehouse. North Korea has a huge, vast network of tunnels that they have dug in that will protect what's inside from overhead bombing. And they keep artillery in there. They got lots and lots of artillery. They're keeping their missiles in there. They're probably keeping their bombs in there. Anybody who goes on into North Korea with a decapitation strike cannot guarantee for a fact that they will get all of North Korea's long-range weapons. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I got an idea here that I don't know anything about computers, but it seems to me maybe China, with their notorious hacking, maybe they somehow hacked these ships, and that's how they hacked the radar. I mean, it's all on digits somewhere. I don't know exactly how the radar works, but they hacked it, or somehow sent a false signal, and that's how they made these. They forced these ships to sink.
That's kind of a little bit out there, and I'll tell you for two reasons. First of all, I mean, if it's that easy for the Chinese or the Russians to hack these ships, then they need to be overhauled completely. Second of all, there is a thing on Navy ships called a lookout. That's an actual human being out on both bridge wings with binoculars that are actually looking to see something that's out there. So I think this was another case like the Fitzgerald, where they just thought they were butch and they got a fast warship, and yeah, we can cut in front of this thing and not get hit, and they miscalculated.
Well, I just threw that idea out there, but the thing is, if that's what it was, and they're not going to admit it because they're so embarrassed, they're going to try to.
Yeah, I know you're throwing that idea out, and I agree with you. We need to throw that idea out. Okay, this is the latest in a long line of absolute blunders by what has become an incompetent U.S. Navy officer corps. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Paul in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mr. Rivero, let's take the previous caller's call a step further. Supposing the people on that boat did not have any control over the maneuverability, as in the electronic systems we're totally taking over.
All right. Well, thank you for the idea here, and obviously a bunch of loyal Navy personnel want to save the reputation of their force. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And look, I understand that for all of our Navy veterans out there, they don't want to see the Navy get a black eye, but the Navy just got another black eye. And no, it wasn't Chinese hackers, and no, it wasn't somebody getting on in and making the ship go someplace that the crew did not want. Because on those ships, there are direct linkages from the bridge controls to the engine and rudder. And there's nothing that gets in the way. I mean, the computers can be used to guide the ship like an autopilot. But just like on an airplane, you can turn that autopilot off. And you can take manual control of the ship. It's not that hard. In fact, generally helm duty is given to one of the least senior members of the crew. So they get all excited. I got to drive the ship today. And they have a little tiny ship's wheel. It's not a big thing like you'd see on a tall ship, about the size of a telephone dial, and direct controls to the engine's throttles. Everything else on the engines is run by the engineering crew down below. So, I'm sorry, it wasn't hacking. It wasn't a deliberate attack. This is the U.S. Navy not being able to drive its ships around and play by the rules. In fact, looking at the damage on the John McCain, it looks to me like, once again, they were trying to cut in front of this ship and misjudged the closing speed. So, yeah, there's a problem there. All right, getting on to more news. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, Steve Bannon's gone back to Breitbart News, at least for the moment. He's going after National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, because apparently McMaster is the one who is really putting pedal to the metal for more and continued wars. And at this point, I don't want to be cruel about it, but I think somebody needs to give the United States a seriously bloody nose in one of these combat areas. And it might be North Korea. Get people to calm down over all of this stuff. Now, Bannon is only going to be at Breitbart for a little while, because apparently Bannon is considering starting his own news network. Will be a competitor to Fox News. And Steve, I could use a job. Apparently, Roger Ailes may become involved with it as well, after the way he was ejected from Fox. So this could be the beginning of a serious war within the corporate media world. As far as Megyn Kelly is concerned, well, things are not going all that well. Her Sunday night news show has been yanked off the air. They're going to give her one last chance to try and put something together that will draw an audience, and already her coworkers are saying this is not going to work. And yes, she's pleasant to look at. But, you know, people don't turn into the network news to see pleasant-looking ladies, or gentlemen for that matter. They're trying to find out what's going on. And once you get a reputation that you are lying to people, they are going to turn you off. And that's why we're in the state we're in right now, where the big news networks are faking their numbers. They're using click bots to inflate the clicks on their websites. They're in serious trouble, but their owners, their masters, will not let them go back to telling the truth about anything. Now, here's a story that broke over the weekend. Oh, boy, is everybody going to get excited about this one. Debbie Wasserman Schultz's IT staffers are now under investigation for having stolen information from congressional offices and their computers and selling it to foreign governments, such as Pakistan. And apparently the FBI is focusing very heavily on Wasserman's chief IT staffer, Imran Awan, and saying that basically he had access to every single computer everywhere in the House of Representatives, and the information that was gleaned from these computers can be used to compromise, blackmail, and control members of the House of Representatives. This is a serious betrayal. It's not getting a lot of coverage on the corporate media. It's all Trump and Russia are working against the nation. It's Trump and Russia. No, it's the Democrats. Now, Imran Awan is already indicted on the financial crimes, bank fraud and so forth. And they're investigating him on what is basically an espionage charge. He needs to make a deal, and somebody needs to put him in protective custody because he's a liability. He can bring down Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz in turn can bring down Hillary Clinton, the heart of the narcocracy. Love to see it happen. Love to see it happen. And, I mean, talk about greed out of control. These guys were being paid huge salaries by many members of the House of Representatives, and still their greed got the better of them. Apparently, they were stealing iPads. Taxpayer paid for iPads and selling them online. I mean, it's ridiculous. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And apparently, members of Congress whose data was compromised tried to cover it up. Didn't want to report that there'd been a data breach, which tells us there was something on their computer that can be used to blackmail and control them. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Lenny in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I hate to be the pallbearer of bad news, but Roger Ailes is dead, isn't he?
I didn't think he had. I mean, Jerry Lewis just passed, and so did Dick Gregory.
Yeah, you said Roger Ailes going in with Steve Bannon to form his own news network, but I think Roger Ailes died.
Well, let me see. I'm trying to look back to the original story, and let's see where it came from. Yeah, oh, yes, yeah, he did die on May 18th. Well, then why are they mentioning? Okay. Oh, apparently they're bringing out details of how he was going to be involved. Apparently they've been planning this for a while, but yes, you're right. He did die. My bad.
Yeah.
My goof.
No, it's okay. Hey, everybody's entitled to a bad, man. We're human beings. Hey, listen, I got one question for the Navy, who can't seem to get out of the way of a freight ship. How the hell are you gonna dodge a ship-killing cruise missile if you can't get out of the way of a freight ship?
Well, I think in the case of the incoming cruise missile, they're going to be looking out for it. This was just a stupid mistake. And you know something? I spent enough time on the water. I did see a lot of stupid mistakes. People will get out there. They get visions of pirates in their head. And they'll do some really crazy things. They'll run up on the rocks. In fact, just to share it with you a little bit, my sailing career, if you will, came to an end. I was sailing with a gentleman I'd made friends with, and he had this 35-foot Norwegian double-ended fishing boat converted for recreational use. And we used to sail out Catalina all the time, out to Anacapa, the Channel Islands, and we had a lot of fun. And then one day we were out in two harbors on Catalina, and there was a major, major November storm coming in, and everybody was saying, we just got to wait this one out. And so we wake up the next morning, and we're out at sea. This guy who was a captain, and he had his master's papers, just decided he wanted to test himself and his boat against the ocean. And we finally did make it back to San Pedro. It's the most seasick I've ever been. And none of us ever went out with this guy again because we thought he had a death wish. In part because as we were crossing over to San Pedro, we were listening to the Coast Guard radio. There was a ship, same size as ours, went down. So, yeah. The sea is a harsh mistress. So is the sky. And but in this case, we're just dealing with really dumb mistakes. When the Greenville killed that student ship, they were just showboating. They had a bunch of VIPs on board, and they were going to do one of those soaring emergency surfacing where they come halfway out and then slap back down, and everybody goes, "Ooh, that's fun!" And they came on up literally underneath this Japanese fishing boat. And literally ripped it in half. Anyway, Lenny, thank you for the update. And yeah, I don't know why that headline had something about Ailes in there in light of that, but you're right, he did die back on May 18th. We're going to let you go here. Thank you very much. And here's another little interesting thing that's evolved. Hillary Clinton, following her election defeat, now you would think when you're running for the president and you lose at that point, all of your campaign workers are fired. But Federal Election Commission filings show that Hillary Clinton's campaign paid the former vice chairman, Huma Abedin, $65,000 since Hillary's defeat for the White House. Now, what is the Hillary Clinton campaign paying Huma Abedin all that money for? To maybe stay out of the media limelight? To keep her mouth shut? That's a lot of money. Apparently, WikiLeaks has come out with yet more of the pay-for-play scandal. The King of Morocco gave the Clinton Foundation $12 million for a single meeting with Hillary as Secretary of State, and 6 months later, Morocco got the weapons from the United States that they wanted. Okay. Now, it's becoming very obvious right now that Attorney General Sessions, Special Prosecutor Mueller, are not going to do anything about James Comey. Now, James Comey has made a heck of a mess. By his own admission, he's created and then leaked memos to ensure a special counsel would be appointed to investigate President Trump. By doing so, Comey broke government rules and laws. And Judicial Watch is stepping on in and filing a lawsuit, given that Special Counsel Mueller doesn't seem interested. The Special Counsel just wants to find Russia, 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 Trump, 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 Trump. Oh, Hillary spying, no big deal. Head of the FBI, manufacturing fake news, no big deal. They're obsessive over there. But Judicial Watch has filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Department of Justice for all non-disclosure agreements pertaining to the handling, storage, protection, dissemination, and return of classified information that were signed by or on behalf of former FBI Director James Comey. They think that he's obviously mishandled some data. But then, according to James Comey, it's okay to mishandle classified information as long as you mean well. Now let's get on back down to Charlottesville, because that is still being pounded for all it is potentially worth, and they're out there screaming, we got to tear down the statues of all the white people. All the white people statues have to go. I guess that includes the Pillsbury Doughboy. And apparently more information is coming on out that what happened in Charlottesville was a staged propaganda operation. Now, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, who's a longtime Clinton crony, was out there in the media saying the police found weapons stashed by the people who wanted to protect the Confederate monument, and the police have gone public saying, no, we didn't. The only ones who had the weapons were Black Lives Matter and Antifa. So Terry McAuliffe is in on this agenda. We've got to demonize the white people. The white people are bad. Another story, this one coming out of 12160. Apparently, eyewitnesses are confirming that the KKK, Antifa, and Black Lives Matter all arrived on the same buses. And remember, they found that Craigslist ad to hire people to show on up and cause a ruckus. It's fake. It's just fake from top to bottom here. Now, somebody over at the White House petition website started a petition to label Antifa as terrorists, which makes sense when you look at the violence they have been carrying out. And the number of signatures has already soared way past the 100,000 mark required, at which point the White House will respond. Now, the response could be, no, thank you. That's been their response to a lot of other petitions that met the signature requirement for things that are not popular with either the liberals or corporate boardrooms. But it does show the American people view Antifa as the bad guys. They're not going for this agenda of demonizing white people. Adding fuel to the fire, this coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, one of the organizers for Black Lives Matter is saying that white people don't own anything because everything that produced in this country was produced with slave labor, that white people don't own anything. It's all collectively the property of the black population. That was the same thinking that led to the Rhodesia upset, Zimbabwe. They're already out there pushing that idea. Now, Rush Limbaugh is sounding a warning. He's looking at the sheer aggressiveness that we're seeing from Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and all these groups. And he's saying, we're on the cusp of another civil war. And he could very well be right. This one is going to be very different from the first Civil War, because the first Civil War, there were natural battle lines along the state boundaries. Here we have the two antagonistic groups thoroughly blended in with each other, which means it's going to be just total chaos and a free-for-all on the streets of America if you keep falling for all this stuff, because it is all propaganda. You okay? All right. Anyway, Nancy Pelosi has just signed on to this call for a censure against President Donald Trump for refusing to put the blame solely on the white people. Now, polls are showing that the majority of Americans agree with Donald Trump. Both sides were committing acts of violence. Everybody can see with their own eyes. It was the Antifa Black Lives Matter who started the violence. And the police just stood back and let it happen. And now we have some of those police saying they were ordered to stand down and let the riot get out of control. So Nancy Pelosi is now on board. You know, how dare you not blame solely the white people? And I think it tells us that agenda is beginning to fail. People aren't going for it here. Apparently, Black Lives Matter have stormed the French Quarter down in New Orleans, and they're demanding the removal of the statue of President Andrew Jackson, who's the 7th president of the United States. So where is this going to stop? And the answer is it's not going to stop. There's always going to be another statue, another monument, another memorial, another tomb that they feel shouldn't be there anymore. Once you give in to that frenzy, we're going to tear things down because they offend somebody somewhere. There's always going to be somebody somewhere who stands up and says, oh, yoo-hoo, I'm offended. Go ahead and tear it down. It's fine with me. They're trying to get everybody obsessed over something that happened 150 years ago to keep you from looking at what is going on right now in front of your eyes. Apparently, Vermont's Attorney General has settled Vermont's claims of fraud against Jonathan Gruber, who was the MIT professor who served as a technical consultant for President Obama and one of the chief architects of Obamacare. And apparently, they had him up on a fraudulent billing case, and they're not going to prosecute. They worked out a deal, which is very generous for Gruber. Now, he can no longer work as a taxpayer-funded economic consultant for the state's healthcare system, and he's not going to try and collect money he thinks he's already owed, and in exchange, they will not pursue legal action against him. So he basically got to walk. Got a get-out-of-jail-free card here. Now, over in Russia, where they're maintaining a GMO-free agricultural industry, they're going to get a bumper grain crop that will break the best record from the Soviet era. And this is going to be huge, and they've got customers lining up. They're expected to harvest 130 million metric tons of GMO-free grain. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And they're actually covering the John S. McCain collision. And they're still searching for those 10 sailors. If they haven't found them by now, they're not going to. Same thing, sadly, tragically, about those 5 Army people that went down off the western shore of Oahu a few days ago. And again, it's all very fragile machinery out there. I'm getting a lot of people writing on in over this issue about the statues. And one of them was pointing out the fact that maybe the reason they want Andrew Jackson's statue torn down was because he paid off the national debt and shut down the Second Bank of the United States. Somebody else also wrote in with the Antiquities Act of 1906, which was passed by the United States Congress, signed into law by Theodore Roosevelt on June 8, 1906, to protect all American monuments in perpetuity, which means it is illegal under federal law to remove these statues and monuments. Somebody else wrote on in to clarify the fact that there aren't actually any statues of white people anywhere in this country. They're either bronze or granite. So, good point there, I think. Alrighty, getting on back to the news here. Apparently, there's been some kind of an economic upset over in China. And they're looking at some pretty potentially ugly bank runs. And apparently a lot of this got tied in with this new facial recognition and identity card check for ATMs. That they're putting in because apparently there's been so many withdrawals from the ATMs, they're starting to wonder if they're legit or if in fact there's a real bank run going on. So that's just starting up, and we're going to have to just keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, Air Berlin is now bankrupt, and they will not be able to refund tickets that were purchased for flights that will not happen. Okay. Another reason why I don't get into the cryptocurrencies, Enigma has been hacked, and apparently over $470,000 in Ethereum. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute here. Not a lot of calls today. I figure probably a lot of our listeners are still in the traffic jams coming back from wherever they went to see the eclipse here. Somebody just emailed me yet another one of these advertisements, this one for Shreveport. A Los Angeles-based public relations firm, blah, 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 is looking for enthusiastic actors and photographers in the Shreveport, Louisiana area to participate in our events to protest a Confederate monument. So they're going to do another one. These are all bought and paid for staged events. We need to get that message out there. We're going to go to the phones. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Michael, sometimes I want to say something here, but times are getting bad when you start envying John from Barbados.
Oh God, I miss him. I miss him so much.
He was a character, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. Well, like attracts like, I guess. Yeah,
he was very, very learned man. But I'll just say something, then I'll listen to your response. But this thing with Robert E. Lee, what an honorable. If you ever watch Gone with the Wind, he'd be like Ashley Wilkes. The guy was he was just an honorable person, and anybody that knows any history knows it wasn't about slavery; it was about states' rights, and that only came on later. But I do have to disagree with some of these things, and I think some of these monuments, like keep Robert E. Lee up there, but explain. Instead of tearing it down, explain what he was about. This Christopher Columbus thing, I got to tell you, since I was a kid, and I'm not as smart as you, but I'm very, I'm well read somewhat, I guess relatively, but just, in his journal, this is from Christopher Columbus. Columbus didn't mince words about his intentions after meeting the Arawak natives in the Bahamas in 1492. He described the encounter thusly: "They bought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built with good bodies and handsome features. They did not bear arms. It did not know them, for I showed them a sword, and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want." Columbus would add, "As soon as I arrived in the Indies on the first island, which I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that we might learn what information they have in these parts." This guy was a criminal. This guy should have been.
He was doing what he was paid to do. He was doing what he was paid to do. The people who financed his expedition to the New World, they said, we want wealth, we want slaves. We want new lands we can conquer and turn into plantations. That was the job description.
No, I understand that, but I think instead of pulling the monuments down, put underneath his monument what this guy was about. Put a monument. Don't take Stalin down. Describe the 100 million people he killed. Don't take, instead of tearing these things down and erasing history like I totally agree with you about, why not explain what these people did? Christopher Columbus was a mass murderer, regardless of whatever his reasons were. He didn't have to take the job. This guy was he was a murderer. He was a mass murderer. And I know according to the Times, maybe, the Catholic religion, which, I agree with you totally on, being raised a Catholic, I know what they're all about. But I mean, what I'm saying is, I agree with you, not erasing history, but explaining history. Don't take it down, don't erase it, but explain what criminals they are. Mm-hmm. Explain Robert E. Lee, what a good man this guy was. He wasn't fighting for slavery, to keep slavery. He was fighting for states' rights. And that's what I think we need to do. We need to just not tear down, but explain.
Yeah, I agree with you, but as this new ad shows, this is all theater. It's all bought and paid for theater, and they're just going to keep on going until they can create an illusion of a movement of blacks against the whites, and then, we could see some real violence in the streets leading to national emergency, martial law. Who knows where this is going? But right now, I saw an article only a week ago about how under President Trump, gun sales have begun to decline. I'm willing to bet a whole nickel that they're starting right back up now because everyone is very concerned about violence in the streets of America.
Yeah, protect yourself. That's the first priority. Protect yourself and your family. Mike, I love your show. I agree with 98% of what you have to say, and you go back to Thomas Paine, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you very much for the very, very kind words. All right, we're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the news. And, they're still talking about the eclipse instead of the really important stuff here. Now, apparently over in Europe, Soros is still pushing forward on his plans for one world, one government, one private central bank here. And apparently Soros is pouring large amounts of money through lobby groups in Washington to pursue what he is calling the Soros Plan, specifically targeting Hungary, which stands in the way of Soros flooding Europe with 1 million migrants every year. This is coming from Viktor Orban's ruling party. So here we have a private citizen literally going to mess around with the government of another foreign country. That's a violation of the Logan Act right there. Soros could be arrested and thrown in jail for 10 years. But he's still out there pushing. Greece is now, I feel sorry for the Greek people. First of all, they got scammed by the IMF, turned into debt slaves. The bankers are in Greece just picking off their national assets. And on top of that, of course, they have borne the brunt of much of this refugee migration into Europe. And just like Italy, the social systems are starting to collapse. And these migrants are coming on in. They're trying to pose as refugees. Not all of them are. Most are economic migrants, and they've been lured to Europe with all these fabulous stories of free things they're going to get, which they're not getting. And so they're getting angry and they're making demands. Well, we were told that we were going to get this. Who told you that? Well, somebody who claimed to speak for the government. And so that is really adding to the problems of Greece. I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing some of the member states of the European Union just say, that's it, we're done, we're out, at which point we're going to see Brussels try and rally an army from the other member states to invade. And I don't think those other member states are going to go along because they, too, are feeling the pain of the refugee crisis. They, too, are feeling the pain of the European Central Bank. I'll be very surprised if the European Union is still around here end of the year. Now, Nigel Farage, following what happened in Barcelona, is wagging his finger mightily at Brussels, saying that the EU's immigration policy, open borders policy, is endangering the lives of Europeans. Because so many of these recent terror attacks involve migrants who've just crossed across that border. Because there is no security policy. And of course, we keep hearing back from people in the globalist one world agenda saying, well, yeah, there's going to be some problems, but really it's for the greater good. I think the people of Europe have had just about enough of this nonsense. And probably for that reason, they're bringing up the big guns. Pope Francis is now out there urging countries to improve their welcome to migrants and stop these collective expulsions, saying migrants' dignity and right to protection trumps national security concerns. Well, migrants can have dignity anywhere they want to go or anywhere that they happen to be standing. Just act dignified. But there is no right to protection other than that right to protect yourself. And not rush off to somebody else's country and say, ooh, please help me, help me, help me. And the Pope put this out there on the Catholic Church's 2018 World Refugee Day. And he's still out there repeating this over and over and over again. Now, I have a question for you, Your Popeness. How many refugees and migrants do you have inside the Vatican right now? Got a big wall around the place. I've been there. I've seen it myself. Big, huge wall. How many refugees are in there right now? We seem to be seeing a lot of people who are out there talking real big about we must be loving and open borders, and then you actually go and look, and they're not part of it. Israel isn't welcoming in any of these African or Syrian migrants. Look at George Soros' place through Google Earth. I don't see any refugee camps on that estate. Same thing with the Vatican. It's all talk, all talk. Up in Germany, Angela Merkel is really facing an uphill battle for her re-election. Because even though, despite the terror attacks, despite the massive sex assaults on German girls, Merkel is still out there saying we're going to keep the German borders open. She's already out on the campaign trail. And she's getting on up there and starting to speak, and she is being booed and called traitor on that stage. In fact, the negative reaction to Merkel, it's even worse than Hillary was getting. So I don't know what Merkel is planning to do to secure re-election, and it probably involves a huge amount of election fraud. But the popular support for her, it just is not there. The German people are all fed up. Now then, apparently there was this incident over in Cedar City. It's being reported by thespectrum.com, and involves an illegal immigrant who'd already been deported. And he came on back, and apparently he has been charged with raping a 7-year-old girl multiple times. And he says he's innocent because it happened by accident while he was just applying lotion to her skin. They were just roughhousing around following taking a shower together. And he actually thinks that's going to get him off. But he's basically under arrest. He's looking at all kinds of charges. Yeah, this is a 7-year-old girl who will, in all probability, be psychologically scarred for life, but a small price to pay for the globalists and the one world government here. All right, let's take a phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. The Navy has finally decided to get it in gear in terms of trying to remediate these ship accidents. And if you recall, the military suffered a severe brain drain when Obama got rid of quite a large number of officers whose political views weren't in agreement with his own.
Well, that was clearly a mistake.
This has created some suspicion. So the Navy's going to have Mark Carmen and Michael Weatherly looking at the financials of the officer crews of these ships.
Okay, you're getting garbled. You're getting garbled. Try and speak a little closer to the microphone.
Okay, I said they're going to have Mark Harmon and Michael Weatherly look into the financials of the officer ranks of these ships, and see if anybody's perhaps working for the enemy and subversives on the inside. In the meantime, they've decided to commission interim vessels to try and make up for temporarily for some of the losses, and they're commissioning the USS Laughingstock class of boats. These are refurbished PT boats with rubber baby buggy bumpers all around. And they figure, with that, they should be able to avoid other boats. They're calling back Ernest Borgnine and Tim Conway to be the instructors, and so they're going to commission these, and they get very superior, maneuverability and impact resistance. So.
Also, there's an advantage. There's an advantage. You got that short bow, so you can reach over it while holding that red and white cane as you sweep it back and forth as you drive the thing around.
Exactly, and then you can bounce off things a little better too. So, So if Mark Harmon and Michael Weatherly, if the NCIS can't find any financial shenanigans, well, who knows? Nobody can. So, so at least they're making efforts,
Well, they're making efforts, and I admire a good try, but I think what we actually need is to see something actually getting done and made to work. And you may have hit the nail right on the head. When Obama was in office, he was getting rid of a lot of top military officers and planners for their political views. And what was left behind were basically the more liberal, and they may have been handling ship staffing with a liberal point of view. And again, they may have been assigning crews to ships based on political expediency, political view, and lost track of the idea of a meritocracy, because something sure has gone wrong. And I'm wondering if we have a Navy that's being driven around the ocean by a group of liberal snowflakes who just can't really seem to get anything done well.
Right. Well, you mentioned before that people, you talked about a captain who decided to push his boat, or people deciding, let's try this. That impulse is supposed to be offset by professionalism, training, authorities, structure, and it's just like the risks of flying are offset by technology and proper procedure and professionalized training. So, I mean, it's kind of hard. I have a hard time rationalizing that somebody just decided to get a little exuberant when, like I say, those impulses are supposed to be tamped down through professional training and professional accountability. So, unfortunately, that's not happening. So.
No, it doesn't. And in both the Fitzgerald case and the McCain case, it just seems that whoever had the con at that point, thought that they could get around the front of these ships, and they miscalculated. They absolutely miscalculated, and they forgot the idea. In case of doubt, exercise on the side of caution. Part of it, of course, is that awareness that you're responsible not just for the ship, but for the lives on board of it. And that, to me, it would be a factor where I absolutely would not take any risks with that ship and the personnel, because I wouldn't be able to handle it if I was responsible for somebody getting killed.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's just horrifying. Absolutely. On a different note, you had mentioned earlier a statue of the Pillsbury Doughboy. Was he a World War I hero? I'm not familiar with that.
No, he's sort of a bakery kind of a guy. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go and take a break for commercials. Right. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Coming up on the top of the hour, somebody just wrote on in saying that the USS John S. McCain rammed out of the ship because it had a tumor. A little bit of dark humor there. All righty, getting on back to immigration and migration and the rest of it. Over in Great Britain, 20% of all the unemployed people are migrants. They are not able to find employment, they do not arrive with the necessary skill set, including, first and foremost, speaking the local language. And that is really what's causing a lot of friction. Now, the open borders people are out there saying, oh, it's racist to make them speak your language. That's why Teddy Roosevelt was a racist. He said people moving to this country ought to learn to speak English. How are you going to get along? How are you going to read the road signs? How are you going to follow directions at your place of employment? Really is ridiculous out there. Apparently, California is looking at a bill right now that will result in a year in jail if you use the wrong transgender pronoun. And I'm not even sure how many of those are out there, but it's a rapidly expanding list. But this idea that you can be put in jail for using the wrong label. Remember the big stink back when the feminists came up with the Ms.? You know, they didn't like being called Miss or Mrs. That gave away their marital status. They wanted to fool around as much as the guys. So they said, just call us Ms. And if you called a woman Miss or Mrs., oh, would they get upset? Oh, I'm a Ms. You will call me this. Oh, okay, fine. It's amazing here. All right, let's talk about some science and health issues. And as you know, this whole Zika fever thing spun out of control. They were looking at an outbreak of this microcephalic problem down in Brazil, and they blamed it on the Zika virus, even though Zika has been around for 60 years and it's never produced that result before. By the way, all the women who had these microcephalic babies had been subjected to an experimental vaccine, but we don't talk about that. It's all the fault of Zika and the mosquitoes, and companies that are spraying pesticides for Zika and the mosquitoes are making a ton of money out of the fear. Oh, it's Zika. We have to buy this stuff here. And unfortunately, over at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, and the Center for Human Growth and Development, they have found that the pesticides being sprayed on U.S. cities to fight the Zika virus, which, by the way, Zika tends to go away by itself. The pesticides being sprayed on U.S. cities to fight the Zika virus have been discovered to harm motor coordination and neuromuscular systems in children. There was a measurable decline in fine motor skills for these studied children. But it makes money, and that's all that really matters. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. It's hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we will get back into the news here. Let's see what's on the headlines over there. Okay, apparently there is now a major lawsuit against the CVS pharmacy, and apparently Walgreens got sucked into this as well, where it was discovered that they're basically charging people with insurance more for the same prescription drugs. It's basically an overcharging scheme, which is defrauding the insurance companies, and it's also going to defraud the insurance, the insured patients, because of there's going to be a cap. And apparently it was a huge, huge scheme, and it affected prescriptions including lithium, naproxen, and zolpidem. Lawyers of Schultz have said the public remains unaware of this repulsive behavior in which pharmacy chains charge more for customers who use their insurance to pay for generic prescriptions. The class action lawsuit also includes Walgreens in its description, citing the company's apparent lack of ethics as it blatantly overcharged customers through industry middlemen. See, the healthcare system in this country is not about your health. It's about money. It's about the money, grinding more money out of you. And the sicker that you are, the more money they make. Boy, somebody's really hammering on my server. I must have said something to upset somebody. All righty, getting onto the phones here. Sue in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I listen to you all the time.
Thank you.
And I like you, and I love to hear your wife, and I think you're very nice to your wife. And here in this area, it's very rare that we hear men very nice to the wife. But listen, I have a problem with Eisenhower.
Okay.
Dwight Eisenhower and his death camps, and how after the World War he killed all these Germans in the camps, and they didn't even have any place to lay their heads, and they starved them to death because of General Eisenhower.
Yes.
Could you please explain that to me?
Well, basically, it was, Germany lost the war, and there were a lot of people who wanted the German military, meaning the soldiers, to simply be eradicated. And yes, it was a horrible war crime to do, and Eisenhower was never held to account for it because he was on the winning side. The winners in the wars, they get to write the history, and they'll demonize the conquered enemy to make it look like it was all just and moral, and of course they will hide their own war crimes, of which there were many. It's only in the age of the internet that war crimes committed by our government are basically getting out into the public eye, like what happened at Abu Ghraib and so forth.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you very much for all you do and getting the message out and everything, but I did have to ask you about that because sometimes I hear you talking about Eisenhower, but I don't feel very good about Eisenhower, but, that's each to its own.
People change over time, and one thing that's very obvious is that Eisenhower's experience in the war is what turned him into one of the most anti-war presidents we ever had. And it is quite likely that Eisenhower was seeking absolution for some of the things that he had to do as the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. And certainly none of the other Allied governments voiced any opposition to the treatment of the German POWs. They all thought it was just the thing to do here. But certainly when you look at Eisenhower as president, he was anti-military. He sounded the warning about the military-industrial complex. And I think that's an advantage when you have a president who's actually been in combat on the front lines and seen it for his own eyes. You're going to have somebody who's not ready to go to war, because unfortunately for most of the people we have in our current government, war is like a video game for them. It's clean. It's what they see on TV, and it makes it too easy for them to go into it because it's other people's children and money that gets spent.
Yeah, listen, Afghanistan here, President Trump's going to be addressing Afghanistan this afternoon or this evening, I believe.
Yes.
I don't know what he's going to say about this, but I don't think we need to put any more troops in Afghanistan. Do you?
I'm absolutely in agreement with you, but unfortunately, the indications I have is that the United States government, in their desire to never be seen to lose a war, is about to up the ante in Afghanistan. And we've already been there 16 years. It's been 16 years of epic fails and disasters, and all they've gotten out of it are the oil and gas and the opium. And so I don't, the indications are, they're going to amp that one up and say we're mighty and we're all conquering and so forth and so on.
Well, Michael, thank you very, very much for all you do. And I listen to you almost every day. And keep up your good work. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words, and I'll pass your wishes on to the lovely Lady Claire. And we're going to switch to Sherry in Fredericksburg, Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I got an article from a friend of mine that said, and this is current, I believe, Dish fined for violating do not call list. Did you hear about that? This is on the order of corporate greed.
Well, good. I mean, absolutely. Of course, they may have done a calculation and said, well, if we call these people, we're going to make X number of dollars, out of which we'll have to pay a fine of Y amount of dollars, and we're still going to be in profit, so we're going to go ahead and do that.
Well, I don't know. This this was one of the highest ever paid for telemarketing violations. It was $280 million in penalties.
Wow.
And what they did is they came up with a company, Colorado. It was a federal judge determined this week that the Colorado-based Dish Network was liable for the telemarketing violations of third-party call centers hired by the satellite company. Now, what they did is they picked a call center that had no proper supervision or vetting, and it was determined that they should have known what they were doing. It said the Dish's reckless decision to use anyone with a call center without any vetting or meaningful supervision demonstrates a disregard for the consuming public. And so the Dish people came in and said, oh, no, the court shouldn't hold Dish responsible for this because it included in circumstances where the third party intentionally hid their telemarketing efforts from Dish. Like, oh, you don't think they wanted them to? Oh, so they're going to get these someone else to do their dirty work. Dish is going to get someone else to do their dirty work. They don't want to be connected with it. You know, they know they're going to do this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. If a corporation isn't responsible for telemarketing violations by these little call center groups, then they're going to hire the call center groups and just say, you know, go and do what you're going to do.
Don't tell us about it.
I'm in agreement with the Colorado judge. Dish should have exercised a little more due diligence and kept an eye. And if they can set that as a legal precedent, then we might get some of this telemarketing stuff under control, because it is totally out of control right now.
And this also demonstrates the wheels of justice, how slowly they roll along. This thing first came up in 2009, and it didn't go to trial to 2016, and now it's just here, 2017, that they're finally got this determination and fined them. So, you know, you really have to be patient with these things. I know how much we want things to go to trial, but I was just happy to see this because it's so unfair. These people, you know, I've called do not call lists and had them call anyway, and I thought, gee, that didn't work very well, you know? I mean, now we know. So, interesting.
Yeah, there's actually one telemarketing company right here in Hawaii who has their actual call center on Guam, outside legal U.S. jurisdiction. So, yeah, they're constantly violating the do not call list and various other abuses. All right, Sherry, we're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Ramsey in Canada. Aloha, Ramsey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. You're on the air.
Yeah. See, sir, I want to ask you a question. I was listening to one of the hosts, yesterday in RBN, and we talked about Charlottesville, and he said, see, I wasn't clear on what he said, but, and I was trying to listen to it again through the archives, but the archives didn't put it up yet. He said that the white people going to Charlottesville was a mistake. He said it was like a trap.
Yes.
Have you heard that argument?
Yeah, because the guy who organized this whole thing is actually an Obama operative. And yeah, he got a bunch of white people to go and defend that statue, and they walked into a publicity trap. And that's exactly right, and they're getting ready to do it again in Shreveport.
Okay, so, but see, sir, all the white people that went there to defend the statues, like those were not actual actors, right? Those were actually, like, they were like real people, right?
Some were, some were not. I mean, obviously, if you're a public relations firm and you need to control what's evolving on the ground, you're going to have hired actors on both sides. But the vast majority of people who showed up there were not working for this Los Angeles PR firm. They were just listening to and following the people who were working for the PR firm, not knowing that was what was going on. That's how you get a crowd going and you get them motivated. You don't tell them who you're really working for. All the way back in the 1970s actually, there was a staged riot at Disneyland. The day the hippies took over Disneyland, and it was all set up by undercover FBI informants on the college campuses. And they got all the kids to show up for a peaceful protest, and then they said, oh, they're not paying attention to us. Let's jump the gates, and they went on in. And it wasn't until the COINTELPRO hearings that people found out the organizers of that march in Disneyland had all been undercover FBI informants. And these days they tend to privatize it a little bit more. And we've got confirmation there were, in fact, FBI undercover informants in that crowd as well. So the whole thing is just a big theater production to sell you the idea that, you know, the white people are all racists and supremacists and the black people are all poor victims and we should just, you know, give them all that they want, tear down all the statues, give them all the special advantages in school and the rest of it. And it's just more, it's bread and circuses thinking is what it is.
But see, sir, also in my opinion, this event woke up a lot of white people of what's happening in this country, and also it damaged the image of the black people.
Yes.
Playing the victim card, because see, it was the Black Lives Matter story that the ones that started the problem, the violence. I mean. Yes.
Yeah, they damaged the image of black people in general, and it's backflashing on them, and that's why they're still out there trying to push this thing here. But again, it has woken up a lot of people. That's why I said earlier in the show, I'm willing to bet that all of a sudden gun purchases are headed back up again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, Judicial Watch is one of the many organizations that is looking into the issue of election fraud in last year's election, and they have tallied up the numbers and discovered that last year, on November 8th, 108% of the total voting population of California voted. Now, normally on an election, you'll have a voter turnout of 40, 50, 60%. If it's a really hot election, maybe 70. In this case, 108% voter turnout. And that right there is, again, a confirmation. There was massive election fraud in the election last year. And if Donald Trump doesn't do something about it right now, he's going to lose Congress next year. And he's going to be a one-term president if, in fact, he's not simply impeached, which they're back to talking about that again. Because the deep state, the narcocracy, they're very unhappy. They're unhappy with you, the American people. How dare you vote in a populist president we don't approve of? What's wrong with you? Don't you understand how it's all supposed to work? Okay, now last week, 2 Israeli teens were indicted on charges of running a major hacker ring. And they are responsible for millions and millions of attacks. And these two 19-year-olds were accused from Had Hashron, were accused of running hacking campaigns against targets for fees. In other words, they made their botnets, their DOS system, available for hire. They specialized in distributed denial-of-service attacks, and apparently they cost corporations and governments around the world millions of dollars, and they made quite a bit of money for themselves. Interestingly enough, they actually had stopped their operation on the day before they became legal adults. So they're going to be tried under the much more forgiving Israeli laws for juveniles. Apparently, Google, or as they're starting to call it out there, Gulag, has removed Gab's Android app from the Google Play Store for hate speech. Now, Gab, of course, is a social media system. It's an up-and-comer. A lot of people are switching over to it. And apparently, Google just decided they didn't want the competition, and so they just removed the Android app for hate speech. Because apparently somebody got onto Gab and made a hateful statement. Could have even been one of the Google people themselves. Oh my goodness, there's a hate statement. We can kick them out. We can kick them on out. It's getting ugly out there in social media. By the way, Halt and Catch Fire is back on, I think it's its final season. And it's really good writing, especially for those of us who are actually there and involved. Interesting little story. This is coming out of the Leeds, South Australia. Apparently, tests on USB connections show that they're actually exposed as leaky and vulnerable. They're not as secure as people thought. Apparently, on that little interface where the pins connect, it's actually generating radio noise that can be detected and interpreted at a distance. And I think at some point we'd kind of cool if we all started going optical for a couple of reasons. One, there isn't really enough metal in the Earth's crust to continue manufacturing all these special cables for all of the electronic devices, and the recycling programs aren't working. Second, a lot of people are very concerned about how radio frequency energy is having an adverse effect on our health. So switching to an optical interface, and by the way, somebody tried to do one a few years ago, where it was basically an internet-like connection, and the cables were basically just a single strand of fiber optic with a sheath along it to block out other light, and they were just these little sockets that you'd stick them in, and they had both an LED and a light detector. They worked very, very well. And that, I think, would solve a lot of problems all at the same time, and at the same time be much more difficult for intruders to get data out of. See, the nasty people, and this includes the U.S. government, they rely on the fact that your computers and electronic devices are broadcasting all the time. And I'm not just talking about if it has a cell phone chip in it or a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. I'm talking about as the electronics themselves operate. They'll put out radio noise that can be received and interpreted. I don't know if this is true now that we all have flat panel screens, but back in the days of cathode ray tubes, it was very clearly demonstrated that the radio noise put out by a cathode ray tube could be intercepted at a distance and used to reconstruct what you were seeing on your computer screen. I don't know if that's still true in the day of the flat panel. If somebody actually has the goods on that, I'd be a little bit curious about that to see if that's still possible. Okay, we're coming up on our next commercial break here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right to the phones here. John in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, you just said something about impeaching Donald Trump. What did he do to get impeached for?
Well, it looks like the people in Congress who want to kick him on out are going to impeach him just because they don't like him. But the reality is they have to catch him in some kind of a high crime and misdemeanor, obstruction of justice. That's what Special Counsel Mueller is out there trying to do. He's on a fishing expedition looking for anything that could become the legal foundation of an impeachment trial. And, of course, the other side of that is that if the Democrats can lie, cheat, and steal their way into control of both houses of Congress next year, then the House will impeach and the Senate will remove.
Or just because they don't like him?
Yeah, just because he's not one of them. He's not part of the narcocracy.
I didn't know you could do that.
Well, in theory, you can't, but it looks like that's what they're getting ready to try. I mean, this government has gone so far off the constitutional legal reservation. It's obviously just a mob trying to pretend it's a functioning government, but it's just really just a mob.
Alrighty. Well, they'll have their hands full when they try that, but I guess they can try.
They can try. I mean, I normally don't agree with everything Rush Limbaugh says, but I'm in agreement with him. We could be on the cusp of a new civil war. This whole thing could spin completely out of control between the Trumpers and the anti-Trumpers, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and all the rest of it. And it could just totally dissolve into massive bloodshed in the streets of America, and I absolutely do not want to see that happen.
Me neither, Mike. I hope they pull their head out of wherever it's been and think about it a little bit, because we don't need bloodshed.
No, we don't.
Thank you very much for your time, Mike.
All right, thank you very much for the call. All right, apparently the war on the independent media is continuing. Up in Canada, their conservative website, The Rebel, lost its domain registration. The domain registration service just erased it. And, of course, that means the site is invisible to anybody who doesn't have the direct IP address. And they're scrambling to get back online using a different domain provider. But we're just seeing all around the world where conservative websites, truth activist websites, they're being hacked, they're being shut off. The whiners are coming on in and screaming they've got to be shut down. We're really engaged in a virtual civil war, and hopefully it'll stay there. But at this point, you can tell from the tactics they're using just how afraid they all are. They cannot stand the idea of an open debate on the facts, logic, and law. It's all clubbing. It's all throwing feces. It's all hacking the server. It's all sabotaging the domain name. It's all about getting these large corporations to act as government censors on everything that you're saying anywhere on the net, whether it's GoDaddy or YouTube or Facebook. And I think it's time to recognize that the internet is a public utility and has to be managed as one. Just like the telephone system, just like the water system, just like the power system, and there have got to be rules in there that those who own those utilities are not able to abuse their customers, which is what's going on here right now. Okay, looks like Ron Paul is back there saying it's time to audit the Federal Reserve. And apparently 2 of Debbie Wasserman Schultz's IT aides have now been indicted for conspiracy against the United States. And that includes, of course, Imran Awan and his wife Hina Alvi. 4 counts of conspiracy in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Amran's going to roll on Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Debbie Wasserman Schultz going to roll on Hillary, unless she gets really depressed. Shoots herself in the back of the head 5 or 6 times. All right. Okay. That's good news. I'm very happy about that. All right. Getting on back here to more stuff with the computers. Oh. There's the music. And we got to take a break for commercials and see why the lights are flickering. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here. Sean in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Had a concern about all this stuff you're hearing about people going after these Confederate monuments. There's a place, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's in St. Louis, Missouri. It's called Grant's Farm. And it's actually owned by Anheuser-Busch. And they do daily tours. It's free. You can get on a tram, and they take you all around. They've turned it into a wildlife refuge. But it has a lot of historical relics of Grant there, including one of his mansions and a bunch of, Civil War memorabilia. My question is, do you think with it being owned by Anheuser-Busch, heavily gated and everything, that an area or a place like that would be less likely to fall victim to these plans of vandalizing all these things across the country? What's your thoughts of that?
Well, my thought would be that, Grant was on the Union side, if my history hasn't failed me. So why would they want to tear him down? Or are they just tearing down anything to do with the Civil War?
Well, as crazy as it's getting, my thoughts would be that they would go after everything that had to do with the Civil War.
Well, I'm already hearing people out there saying that any statue of a white person should be torn down.
Yeah, and if it's going to get that ignorant, why wouldn't they include that? Hey, it has to do with the Civil War. Let's tear it down because it's going to bring back bad memories, even if they were on the wrong side.
Yes.
But I was just wondering, with it being more of like a national park and owned by Anheuser-Busch, it seems to me like that would be harder for the public to get to and tear that mansion up and everything. Because it's...
Yeah, I think it would be, but again, you get a large enough mob and you can do something like that. I think it's probably safe, though, because it's not in a central high-density population area. So far, they're confining themselves to the cities. Charlottesville, Shreveport, New Orleans, places where there are a lot of people around, a lot of media around. I don't think they're going to be going on out and looking for Confederate monuments that are just so far away as to just not be worth it in terms of public relations value. When I was living in New Hampshire, we had a Civil War memorial just 3 miles down the road from me. But hardly anybody knows it's there, and so there wouldn't be much value to, like, drive down there and smash it up.
Right. Well, I mean, this is in St. Louis, and St. Louis is a huge city.
Yes.
And, I mean, you've got, you know, that's where all the rioting started down there in Ferguson. And, you know, that's just a hop away from St. Louis. That just, when all this started happening, I started thinking, because it's one of our favorite places to go when we go back to vacation there, is, you know, I hope they don't get wind of that and try to go in there and tear that up, because that would be awful. All the historical stuff they have. I mean, they have his first mansion that he got there. It's absolutely huge, beautiful.
Yeah,
and
well, I mean,
you know, if they mob that would be a sight to behold. I pray that never happens. I just wanted to get your take on it with it. Like I said, with it being so heavily gated, and it is a national wildlife refuge, Anheuser-Busch has owned it for years.
Well, one of the things I admire...
You know, these statues, some of them have very easy access to. You can see why, you know, they tore the one down here in Durham. You could just walk up to it, sling a rope, and down it comes. Which, again, is a violation of federal law.
The one thing I admire about the Bush enterprise is their focus on preserving history of all kinds, and whether it's in St. Louis or Virginia, and they really do a good show. And I like that. But getting on back to this issue, it all comes down to how big an opposition force are you dealing with. If it's just a few vandals with some coolers full of pipes and stuff, then yeah, probably the facility is secure. If they get a whole riot going where we're talking thousands and thousands of people, then it's going to be a different outcome.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't get to that point. But, you know, this is where we are in this country with, you know, with these kids being taught the history that they're being taught today. They have no value for, you know, what actually happened. They don't even know what really happened.
No. And
these people, they have no reasoning for the stuff that they're doing. They don't really even know what the Civil War was really about, or they wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, and it is...
It seems to be the hot thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, it's the fashion statement. It's the fashion trend here. And the irony is we're literally being dragged along to a new Civil War in this argument over the monuments of the first Civil War. And I'm sure that most of the people out there who are being paid $25 an hour to be there, they don't know this and they don't appreciate the irony.
It's true. Bad times we live in. Just hope for the best. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Oh, it is crazy. All right, back to the computer stuff. Apparently, Android has a new Trojan that targets non-banking apps that require a card payment. And this is called FakeToken.g. This is a new variant of a mobile banking Trojan, is being distributed using bulk SMS messages as their attack vector, prompting users to download an image file that actually downloads the malware. And once it's installed, it installs all of its necessary modules and the main payload, which hides its shortcut icon and begins monitoring everything, every call, every app you launch, everything that happens on the infected Android device. And apparently when you make a call, the phone numbers on your device, the caller's device, records those conversations and sends that to the attacker's server. This is sounding less and less like money-making malware and more like yet another government intrusion. So, apparently very sophisticated. Apparently Fake Token also checks what apps the smartphone owner is using, and when it detects the launch of an app whose interface it can simulate, the Trojan overlays the app with a fake user interface, and you'll tap on it and you'll touch it. The malware saves the information, then forwards it onto the actual app, so you don't know it's there. It's kind of like the electronic version of those little card skimmers they put on the ATM machines. Now, a lot of people use the Foxit PDF reader, and as it turns out, apparently they've discovered there are 2 critical zero-day flaws still in there which remain unpatched. And apparently it allows attackers to execute arbitrary code on a targeted computer if not configured to open files in safe reading mode. Boy, don't you miss the good old days where you bought a computer and you bought software and you had fun and you were productive and you weren't always wondering if it was going to turn on you, sell you out to the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, organized crime. All righty, let's go to Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I saw your program. I saw your program yesterday. All walls are bankers' walls.
Yes.
And I found it very, very, very interesting. And like you said, I think the third world war is going to start because, like you said, because of money. It's all about the money.
Yeah.
It's all about the money.
It's all about maintaining markets, maintaining customer bases or customer pools, and having an advantage over your competition. And again, if you read the article from which that video was made, it goes into a lot more detail about how Winston Churchill was saying that they needed World War II primarily because Germany had succeeded in recovering from the economic prison imposed on them by World War I. And it was all about who was going to be a manufacturing superpower, who was going to have the best exported products all across Europe and the United States. It was all about, countries that didn't want to actually compete to build better, more interesting products, but simply find ways to destroy their competitors.
Yeah, Mike, but I have a quick question. Why was Great Britain so worried about Germany? Why weren't they worried about Russia or some other country besides Germany?
Well, because Germany, coming out of the private central bank imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles, became a manufacturing powerhouse. They were able to manufacture products that the rest of the world wanted to buy. Russia at that time was still coming out of the agricultural age, and they were mostly manufacturing for their own use, and they didn't make good products. But Germany's exports were a direct threat to Great Britain's exports, and that's why Great Britain said we have to find a way to just somehow lure Germany into a new war.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Okay, apparently there is another problem in modern cars, and it has to do with what's called the CAN standard, which is the software that manages the majority of the electrical systems and control units found on the modern smart cars. And apparently a vulnerability has been discovered in it that allows a hacker to turn off crucial safety systems of the vehicle, such as the airbags, power steering, parking sensors, and the anti-lock brakes, or almost any computerized component that's connected to the car's CAN bus. And the CAN standard is being used in practically every light-duty vehicle currently in circulation today. This sounds like something that the government has installed into your car to be able to shut you down if they're chasing you or drive you into a tree if you're getting ready to write an article about Hillary Clinton. We're going to go back to the phones here. Rob in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon. All over the airwaves, and for months people have been like, Civil War. It's going to be a civil war. This isn't a civil war. Okay, I mean we had what was the Civil War on United States soil that had to do with Americans fighting Americans over, and of course I don't have to go over the topic. They wanted to secede, be their own nation. That's fine, but this is something entirely different. This is foreign entities that are actually trying to take over the United States. Whether or not there are Americans here that are part of that issue, they are no longer technically, yes, they may be American citizens, but they're fighting for a foreign power that is trying to take over the United States.
Okay.
So I don't consider this personally a civil war. Because if it was, you follow my drift?
Yes. Well, like I said before, in the Civil War, there were natural battle lines on the state borders. Here, everybody's blended in with everybody. Nobody's going to know where they are, in terms of, am I on the good guys' camp or the bad guys' camp?
Right. And following in the same subject here, one of the things you were saying, and a lot of people say, where does it stop? First, it's Confederate soldiers that fought on the side, and because they believed that the Civil War was, the Confederacy fought for slavery, then let's get them, and then, where are we going to go for next? Let's go for Thomas Jefferson, and where's it going to stop? It's never going to stop, because these people, as misguided as they are, they feel empowered. They haven't been empowered for years because they've been, demoralizing and taking away a lot of Americans' pride and dignity, taking away our jobs, taking away, pretty much downsizing America, getting rid of the middle class, people that used to have something and work towards something and go to college to achieve something, no longer have that sense of achievement. So this is their empowerment. And if that sounds okay for you for now.
Well, no, actually, no, that does make a lot of sense here, because one of the things when they talk about the millennials, we're going to have another lost generation, because you're seeing...
Lost generation.
Yeah, you're seeing people who are constantly being reminded every day of their lives, it doesn't matter how hard you work, it doesn't matter how much you sacrifice, things are not going to get any better, because somebody above you is just going to take away everything that you're trying to create with your labor. And it's not just the black people, it's everybody, the white people as well. And the only way that they can keep on doing that is to try and get these different groups to feel that they are being unduly put upon more than the others. And again, the goal is to prevent us all from uniting together and saying, hey, we got to free ourselves of these money junkies, because, in fact, we are all slaves today to that Federal Reserve.
You have an entire generation of people out there, I'm not going to call them kids or whatnot, they're most of them are adults at this point, 18 or over, that watch a strong middle class, their parents being a part of that strong middle class, and then get hit with one crisis after another and struggle after they lost their good-paying jobs and their good footing in their, again, upper middle class and so on, to struggle. And then when it got to them, they're struggling even more. And then when they go to college, okay, these people want their kids to go to college, and they finally go to college, and then we know, as you know, they're taught nothing. They're coming out with useless degrees, with mega amounts of debt. They're lost souls.
Yes. So
they are so easily manipulated at this point. And this goes back also that we have how many decades we've been screwing around with these, what do you call them, these vaccines. On top of that, as Rappaport gave a report, how 1 out of 4 college students are putting onto drugs because they got some kind of psychological problem, and they've been putting all these kids for years on the drugs. So there are and then they go into school, and then their Common Core into this, and it's practically perfect outline for MK Ultra.
Yeah.
So they've all been brainwashed and drugged. It's been the perfect cocktail.
Well, I don't know that it's perfect. I mean, it certainly seems to be having some unintended side effects in the environment. It is a wonderful metaphor, but yes, we're seeing all these overlapping issues, adverse effects of vaccines, adverse effects of prescription psychiatric medication, an education system that doesn't educate, but is merely another device to trap people hopelessly in debt. And yes, all these millennials who are coming on out, even those who have got good college degrees, like electrical engineering, the jobs simply are not there. And they're having to live with their families and make payments on those huge student loans. And they look forward and they don't see a future. They don't see that there's really a future that's going to be any better than what they have right now. In fact, most people are looking into the future and saying it's going to get worse. And that is definitely something that is going to feed into that anger. And all of these Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and the rest, they're trying to basically direct that anger in a direction that is of use to their agenda, demonizing all white people. Okay,
right.
we got to let you go.
powers that be's agenda.
All right, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today and our last phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently the mayor of Phoenix is trying to convince Donald Trump to delay his visit because of anticipated protests/riots that are going on over there. Okay, we're going to take our last phone call for today. John in Phoenix, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's up?
Well,
I'm just calling to let you know that we got 4% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. I don't see why it's so hard to lock up Hillary Clinton, considering that we got private for-profit prisons now. So somebody would actually make money out providing her a prison cell.
Yeah, but again, it is very angering and frustrating to be seeing all this stuff, to have the former head of the FBI admit that she committed felony violations of Title 18, and Washington, D.C.'s attitude is, it's no big deal. It's no big deal at all. You know, we're too busy out there suing the global warming deniers out of existence or other such nonsense as that. Yes, there are a lot of people that ought to be in prison, but unfortunately at this point it is clear that we have had our government hijacked by a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, we got... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's drug runners, criminals, fraudsters. Everywhere you go, everybody is dirty. Everybody's connected to that narcocracy, whether they're supplying, refining, laundering the money, covering up for the other people. They're all part of the same problem.
Yeah, I mean, and we got over 50% of the people in prison right now are for nonviolent offenses. And if you take into consideration Seth Rich, Hillary Clinton's not a nonviolent offender.
Well, I don't think that she personally pulled the trigger herself, but you know, I think it was a hit for hire.
To do it.
Yeah, she got somebody to do it. And again, this prison industrial complex, it's taken on a life of its own, where you literally have these corporations telling local police, we need more prisoners or you're in violation of your contract. And so police are going out and they're arresting people not because they've committed a crime, but because they need somebody who knows how to use a drill press.
Yeah, I was on the CCA website, and they say it's a good investment because the prisons are full right now.
Yeah, but they're full of people who probably could have been handled without a jail sentence at all under a system where the government still ran the corrections facilities.
All right, well, I'll let you go. You and Claire keep up the good work.
We will as long as we can, and it's been very, very tiring. Thank you very much for the phone call.
No problem, bro.
It was a rough weekend. I did not get any rest at all, and I'm still feeling very, very punchy. I'm probably going to be taking a few days off around the Labor Day holiday. Claire and I need to decompress. We need to walk away. We're very much burned out right now by all that's going on, but we are going to stay on top of things here. Apparently somebody just destroyed a bust of Abraham Lincoln in a Chicago neighborhood, and it's spinning out of control. There isn't even any continuity over why they're doing it. Yeah, maybe I see the argument about the Confederacy, but here you've got Lincoln being destroyed. It doesn't make any sense. It's rampaging for the sake of rampaging, and that's all it is. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and go do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, share what you learn here with everybody else that you know. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program, and Aloha America.